Hello and welcome. Have you ever stopped to wonder why, even when things are going pretty well, you still feel a sense of anxiety or frustration or just unease? Well, today we're going to explore a really profound answer from ancient yogic philosophy. We're diving deep into yoga's map of the mind and what it calls the 5 core afflictions that literally shape our entire reality. It's maybe the most human question of all, right? Why do we suffer? From the really big, life-altering stuff down to the tiny, everyday frustrations, we all deal with pain and dissatisfaction. And what's so fascinating is that long before modern psychology, ancient yogic sites had already developed this incredibly detailed diagnosis for it. So here's the big idea from classical yoga. Our suffering isn't just random. It's not just bad luck from outside events. The real source? It stems from a very specific set of deep-seated cognitive distortions. You can almost think of them as fundamental glitches in our mental operating system, like a bit of faulty code that's always running in the background, shaping every single one of our thoughts and actions. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the diagnosis itself. Then, we're going to dig into the main one, the root glitch called ignorance. We'll see how that creates the I problem, which leads to this constant push and pull in our minds. And finally, we'll talk about the path to finding some clarity. Okay, first up, the diagnosis. This whole framework for understanding what's causing all our mental and emotional turmoil is known as the Pancha-Kleshas. So Pancha-Kleshas, it literally translates to the 5 afflictions. And this is a really, really key point. These aren't seen as moral failings or sins. This isn't about you being a bad person. Nope. They're described as these fundamental cognitive patterns, almost like built-in biases in our mental software that directly cause our suffering. It's a huge shift from blaming ourselves to actually understanding ourselves. And here they are, the big 5. We've got avidya, or ignorance, and this is the big one, the root that everything else grows from. Then comes asmita, or egoism. After that, raga, which is all about attachment. Then dvesha, or aversion. And finally, abhinivesha, which is that deep clinging to life, or you could say, the fear of death. Okay, let's dive into the most important one of all, avidya. Now, this isn't ignorance, like, not knowing a fact for a test. It's a much deeper, more fundamental misperception of reality itself. It's like we're all wearing a pair of distorted glasses that colors everything we see and experience. The classic text, the Yoga Sutras, just nails this definition with incredible precision. It says, avidya is basically seeing everything backward. It's mistaking the impermanent for the permanent, like thinking that brand new car or that big promotion is going to bring you lasting, permanent joy. It's also mistaking the non-self for the self. That's when we identify with our fleeting thoughts and emotions and truly believe I am my anxiety. This one core misunderstanding really sets the stage for every other kind of suffering. And what's so cool about this is how it breaks down into real, everyday stuff. I mean, think about the last time you bought something you really, really wanted. For a minute, it felt like this was it, right? Like it would solve everything. But that happiness was temporary. That's avidya right there in action. Or think about how often we say things like, I'm just an anxious person. Well, yogic philosophy would say, hang on, that's a misidentification. You are not your anxiety. You are the awareness that is experiencing anxiety. And that subtle little shift in perspective, that's at the absolute heart of the yogic path. So, once that root glitch of avidya is up and running in our system, it gives birth to this distorted sense of self, this I that feels totally separate and really vulnerable. And that brings us to 2 very closely related afflictions, egoism and fear. Okay, so first you have asmita, or egoism. This is the moment we start to identify with our thoughts, our body, our jobs, our stuff. We say, my opinion, my success, my failure, and we build this whole identity around these temporary things. This makes for a pretty fragile sense of self, which then leads directly to the second affliction, abhinivesha. This is that deep, primal fear of losing that identity. It's the fear of death for sure, but it's also the fear of failure, the fear of being wrong. Really, it's the fear of anything that threatens our idea of who we think we are. So once we have this fragile ego, right, we become super invested in protecting it at all costs. And that is exactly where the next 2 afflictions come into play. The mind develops these 2 incredibly powerful driving forces that pretty much dictate all of our behavior: attachment and aversion.
And this just shows so perfectly how raga and dvesha are really just two sides of the very same coin. Raga is that pull towards things we remember being pleasant. We want more of that good feeling, so we cling to it. And dvesha is the push away from things we remember as being painful. And together, they create this relentless cycle, this constant tug of war that keeps our minds either chasing pleasure or running from pain, and never, ever truly at peace.
So, that's the diagnosis. A root misperception creates a false ego, which is then constantly yanked around by desire and aversion. But, and this is the good news, the system doesn't just leave us there. It also gives us a really clear path to healing. And here is a critical, absolutely essential point. The yogic path is not about getting into a fight with your mind. It's not about trying to suppress these afflictions with sheer willpower. In fact, trying to do that often just makes them stronger. It just drives them deeper into our subconscious. So, if we can't fight our way to freedom, what's the alternative? Well, the yogic path is way more subtle, way more intelligent. It's about cultivating three key qualities. First, there's viveka. That's discriminative wisdom. It's the growing ability to see things as they really are, to tell the difference between a passing thought and the real you. Then there's abhyasa. That just means consistent, dedicated practice, just showing up and observing your own mind without judging it. And finally, vairagya, which is non-attachment. It's about learning to live your life fully without being emotionally hijacked by the outcome. When you get right down to it, what this framework shows us is that yoga is so much more than just physical postures. It's a profound, incredibly sophisticated psychological system. You could almost call it a science of consciousness, designed to methodically weaken and dismantle the very cognitive structures that cause us to suffer, all leading toward a state of genuine, radical freedom. So, as we wrap up, I'll leave you with the thought to take with you. Looking at this map of the mind, from that root ignorance and ego to attachment and aversion, which of these glitches do you notice playing out most often in your own daily life? It's a really powerful question to sit with.